I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
This evening we have two vacations of alleys that we will have public hearings for. One of those has been requested to be tabled, and we are going to table it until next month, where we will have the public hearing for that as well. Is that correct?
Yes. Yes.
Oh, we might.
Yes. Yes. That is correct. That it is going to be tabled. It has been requested that it be continued. It doesn't need a motion to table though, because we'll simply renotice for the new date. So it has been requested by the party seeking the vacation that it be moved to a later date. So Ron will renotice and we'll go from there.
Ron, is that -17? Do you know which one it is?
I think so, but
It's the one affecting the First Baptist Church.
yeah, I think that was 17.
Okay, so 2022-17 will go back on the agenda next month. So first item is 2022-16, vacation of an alley. Ron, do you want to, for public hearing?
This is a public hearing. This is the opportunity for anyone wishing to comment to come forward. The alley in question is going north off of Washington Street. It is the last north-south alley at the east end of Washington Street. It is just east of Davidson Street. It's highlighted in red here. And the petition is to vacate the alley from Washington Street to the cross alley east-west.
As a reminder, when we vacate alleys, the alley that is being vacated is split amongst the adjoining property owners.
Half goes to each side. In this case, the property owner on the west side also owns the parcel outlined in red here. Joining in that petition is the property owner back here.
Okay.
What is the purpose of the request?
I think we should ask the owner that, who I
Yes.
think is here as well.
That was going to be my answer, and maybe that's a question that would come up later in the meeting when the vacation ordinance is considered.
Sure. Is that fair, Darrell?
Yes, absolutely.
Is the owner of the property here to speak on behalf of this vacation? Would you like to?
Sure.
Please come to the mic and, yep.
Please.
If you would please state your name for the record.
Paul Ruzan.
Okay.
And the reason I asked for the vacation is because the kids come up that alley. They spread my gravel all around. I maintain that alley, the city does not. And they also come up in the parking lot and do their donuts or whatever in it, throw gravel everywhere. It's got to be graded back. And there's also a lot of fast traffic running through there, which is dangerous. You know, there are any kids involved in the area, which the other property owner can contest to that. So, or not contest, but attest to it. All right?
Okay. Thank you. Good evening. If you'd please state your name as well.
My name is Timothy Bray. And we live in the property that's back here, kind of an odd spot in the alley back here. And we've lived back here about 7 years, and the kids will cut across from the high school when they get out at lunchtime. I've had numerous encounters with people where they'll come through here and throw gravel in front of my house. But the biggest concern that I have at this point is that if we block this off, there's nothing to prevent the other property owners from putting fencing up. I'm blocked in, I can't get out, I can't get access. I know there's sewer holes, manhole cover back there, so there has to be some sort of access point. So then I end up with potentially one access point there from the road, but then I end up blocked out back here if Paul decides to put fencing up. And that wasn't really discussed until later on down the line. That's kind of why we're here. We're not opposed to it because of the traffic, but at the same time, we're opposed to dropping property values. You know, if I'm locked in, I'm gonna have a hard time selling that place if I need to later on. But there's as much or more traffic than actually out here on the pavement, believe it or not. And I don't know how we can put a stop to that. I don't know how much signage would help with that. I wouldn't be opposed to like signage saying, hey, it's a private drive, blah, blah, blah. And then see if that helps with the situation until later, until we go to extreme measures. In order for me to agree to that, I would have to have something in writing with my property to the effect that there would be access to the left and out. This property owner here, he's a little frustrated with the situation because then it blocks his driveway, his garage access by one way. So that's kind of where we're at.
Okay, thank you. Is there anyone else from the public here to speak on this topic? If you would please state your name and probably your address for the record.
Yes, I am Cheryl Johnson. I live at 920 East Washington Street. And so our house is right next to his duplex. It blocks the alley is our access to our garage, you know. Also, there is a sewer main back there, the manholes in the alley, gas main. Emergency vehicles wouldn't be able to get back there in case there was a fire or, you know, something with their garage. So it just blocks everything for everybody to get back there. So we are actually against it, blocking the alley. Okay.
Anything else?
Nope.
Thank you. Anyone else here to speak on this topic?
I would like to get some rebuttal here. As far as what you just said, there's another alley coming in from the side off of another street to their garage in the back. They're neighbors next door, but they consume a lot of parking places up on the street. 4 of them they take up, and also they take up parking spaces in the back. They parked on my property forever. In fact, right now there's half a pontoon boat on it and another pickup.
No,
And
it's not.
as far as the neighbor back there is concerned, I'm open to anything to, you know, somehow to stop this traffic, because I'm tired of paying for gravel and stuff and they're throwing it everywhere. And also the danger of a kid getting hit. I don't like that, because I never know when, you know, what a tenant's gonna have in the way of kids. And the way they speed through there, if a kid come out off of the porch and, you know, down the sidewalk and boom, right there he is, you know, at the right time with a kid in a car and whatever, you get killed real quick. That's all.
Anyone else here to speak on the topic? If not, would entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
So moved.
Motion's been made by Daryl, second by Vieta. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed. Okay, today is Tuesday, July 12th, 2022, time being 6:38 p.m. The meeting of the Greensburg City Council is called to order. At this time, please silence all electronic devices. To comply with Title VI of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, the city requests that participants in this meeting complete a voluntary anonymous survey. Amy, would you please call the roll?
Yes. Captain Fleetwood.
Here.
Rick Emswaller.
Here.
Vieta McKenzie. Here. Carol Poling.
Here.
And Jamie Kane.
I did know that Jamie would be absent. You should have received a copy of the minutes from June 14th, 2022. Any edits, additions, or corrections to those? If not, would entertain a motion to approve those as presented.
So moved.
Motion's been made by Rick. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Vieta. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed.
Mayor, please note for the record I abstained since I was not present.
Perfectly well done. Thank you. First item under old business, Cam Troxell is here with First Person this evening. As you may recall, last month he was unable to join us, and we tabled this item. Cam, I'll let you talk about your company a little bit, but it is focused on health insurance, benefits, compensation, all of those things. And you've got a short presentation for us, and then we'll have some time for some Q&A as well, I believe.
Yeah, let me reset back to the beginning here. All right. Thank you, everyone, for the opportunity to be here this evening. We should be coming up. There we go. I appreciate the flexibility. I know I was on the docket last month, but needed to be home taking care of kids, had an issue pop up at home. So really appreciate the flexibility and opportunity to be back in person this evening. So a little about the company that I represent. First Person, also known as an FP. Why two names? First Person, we were a independently owned company as of 18 months ago. We're acquired by a large national firm called NFP. We still maintain 60 employees here in the central Indiana area. What are we about? We're about all things between the employer-employee relationship. You think of things in the context of employee benefits that are offered by an employer to an employee. Also compensation, so how are employers, what is their compensation philosophy with regard to how they pay their folks. Compliance, anything from as it relates to the employer-employee relationship with regard to benefits, employment, so on and so forth. We have compliance support. HR strategy is another piece that we support, and then health strategy is another piece. Today, really focused on those top three things, benefits and compensation, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. And I'm gonna breeze through a couple of these slides here because I want to make sure that I'm mindful of your time. Just a little about some of the cities and towns and public sector employers that we do business with. You're in good company. We have a litany of cities and towns that we work with. This is not an exhaustive list, but this is a list of good folks that we do work with in the central Indiana area. One thing that we also do is we coordinate a cities and towns peer group. So for HR professionals, city leadership, and what have you, we bring those folks together in a strategic way on a quarterly basis to engage and facilitate a dialogue around organizational structure, HR technology, employee benefits, total rewards, mental health, learning and development, communication, etc. As we've engaged with the mayor and other members of your team here at the city, some of the things that we've learned, really the first two are most important. Is you see an opportunity on the health plan for potentially better strategic management, or at least another, an observation or a study, if you will. Same thing on the compensation side, is making sure that we're building a solid compensation and total reward strategy for your employees. This is the lens that we use to look at total rewards. It's kind of all encompassing between, as of the affairs between an employee and an employer. Really, we focus on that top right-hand quadrant, compensation and benefits. Everything that's on this wheel is a part of what an employee would see as part of their employment within an organization. But really, again, today, compensation and benefits are the two things we'd like to talk about. Results Builder is basically just a process that we run that starts with information and data gathering and ends with outcomes and recommendations for whatever topic we are studying. Jumping into benefits really quickly, what are we considering? What's on the table? So as we've engaged with the folks here, with you all, things that we think should be studied on the benefits side. Whether or not we've got the right network in place. So, that you currently use Dunn & Associates as your administrator. We are not suggesting a replacement of Dunn. I just want to call that out from the get-go. We are not a replacement of Dunn. We do not administer health plans. We simply try to optimize and make sure that financially and from a benefit perspective, a value perspective to the employees, that you've got the right balance of cost efficiency and value. We can model plan design, we can model change. So if there are any suggested changes based upon what we see when we benchmark your plans, we could model that out both from a cost perspective and an impact perspective. Really, I think one area of low-hanging fruit opportunity from observation perspective would be to look at the stop-loss policy on the health plan. You pay for a policy called stop-loss. It insulates the plan from any catastrophic risk, if you will. And we've actually got a cities and towns stop-loss captive that we're standing up. Think of that as a buying power collective, if you will, where you band together with other like folks, in this case particularly cities and towns. And the goal there is to band together, reduce administrative or overhead burden on the plan, and create an opportunity for upside or return based upon the premium that is contributed there. So I think that's an opportunity of analysis that we would like to explore. Not saying that we are asking for a decision to do that today. We're just asking for an opportunity to discuss what it can look like moving forward to do the evaluation. And then a benchmark evaluation on the benefits. Things that we look at there are the breakdown of employee versus employer cost, the value of the benefits, how strong are they, how weak are they, depending upon the nature of the benefits that you offer. Sufficiency of coverage, that's most particular on the disability. So sufficiency is really relative to, does the disability take care of folks adequately should they find themselves out on disability. An element of choice, we believe in choice being important as it relates to benefits, and employees having an opportunity to choose the benefits that match their needs. And then whether or not, for you guys specifically, part and parcel of the element of choice, whether an HSA type program might be a good secondary choice option for your folks. I'm not going to cover data needed. That's more of an administrative matter that we could take up with the team after the fact, but we would need certainly a list of data to complete the study. So the second side of this is compensation. When an employer thinks about their relationship with the employer, they think about it in two ways. How well am I paid, and how good are my benefits, right? Is it fair for what I do as an employee? So we just talked about the work that we might consider doing from an evaluation perspective on the benefit side. From the compensation side of things, the way we work is very similar. We intake data, so we would intake compensation data from your employee base, and we would benchmark that against a couple of different benchmarks. We would do it geographically, so within a certain geographic area, how do your pay bands, if you will, so each respective job category has a pay band, so you have several jobs, each one has a respective pay band. For that particular job, how well does that stack up against the geographic benchmark? The second benchmark we would use would be industry specific, or nearest neighbor, if you will. So peer-to-peer, from a public sector perspective, how does your compensation stack up? And then the third piece of that is combining both of those. So industry and geographics, to see how well you stack up when compared to both together. So part of that plan, just like I talked about on the benefits, is data gathering and clarification. We collect job descriptions, really understand what the job entails, so that we can assign it to a benchmark job, if you will, and then benchmark against certain percentiles. So we benchmark 25th, 50th, 75th percentile, and would show you on that spectrum where you fall on each respective job. For you all, that the compensation work would probably include somewhere around 30 or 35 jobs for that work to be sufficient enough to make a good informed decision about how well you are or not paying your folks. That is usually a representation of 60 to 75% of the total jobs within an organization. And that's really, again, about sufficiency of the work to make sure that we were taking a big enough piece of the pie. And then, we can work on the backside of it in terms of remedies or adjustments that we might consider based on, the findings of the benchmark work. So what we wanted to bring forward today in terms of consideration, we've gone back and forth with the team as to what makes most sense or what is most important for you all. Initially we started talking about benefits, then we kind of migrated over to compensation, and then it's kind of in the spot of, maybe both make sense if we strike the right balance. I think it's important to do some element of both because of the linkage between compensation and benefits as an employee thinks about how they're compensated or their total rewards package, if you will. So suggested next steps, and all we would ask for is to offer up some degree of Q&A session to extend the dialogue to a broader audience, which would include yourselves and other constituents that are interested in this potential work. And that would give everyone an opportunity to get clarity as to what could and could not be included in this body of work from an evaluation perspective. From there, if warranted, we would work on a final scope that is specifically dialed in for what is discussed amongst that set of constituents to make sure that it's truly going to meet what your needs are. And then beyond that, we would issue a final proposal and presentation to all constituents.
Cam.
Yeah.
Questions? One thing that you talked about was your public clients and partners, but you didn't talk about your private ones really.
Yeah, you got me on that twice tonight. So we do work with several public sector employers. I mentioned, we put up on the screen several of those. We've got more in the private sector than we do in the public sector even. So we work with employers ranging from 2 employees all the way up to 5,000 employees, 4,500, 5,000 employees. All sectors, we've got construction, we've got some manufacturing, we've also got a significant amount of professional services organizations. We also work with several nonprofits. So really, all types of organizations are groups that we do work with. And so from a representation perspective, that's important. The one thing I do want to note is that when we benchmark things, both from a compensation and from a benefits perspective, our benchmarks are broader than our book of business. So we don't just rely on our book of business. We actually ingest data from many other sources, both national and regional, to help make sure that we've got a deep enough set of data to truly give you a good indication as to where you stand. And it's not just looking at our group's data, because that can have, it's not significant enough to rule out any potential biases, if you will.
You talked about our insurance company a little bit. You're not replacing our insurance company. You work in tandem with them and us to put all that together, right?
Yeah, that's exactly right. So our suggestion on the benefits side of things is to kind of do a peek under the hood, if you will. Basically understand what is currently in place, how effective is it, how efficient is it from a cost perspective, and determine whether or not there are opportunities to create better efficiency or better value within that platform.
Any other questions for Cam? Question to all of you. Would one of you like to serve on some type of insurance benefits committee? We've talked about that a couple times this year. That's where Amy and Julie and Julie, do you have something? Did you want to? Why don't you come up and talk about that too? Sort of getting a group together to sit down with them and Julie and get a better understanding.
Yeah, I think it'd be a really good idea to have some type of insurance committee that we can work, because issues get brought up. We had an issue brought up this last week about maybe a possible change to our plan document for insurance, and it's like, it'd just be nice to have an insurance committee that we could talk about that and see if we want to make those changes. But as far as what they're doing, the benchmarking of the salaries, I think would be a really good thing to start looking at. I'm noticing a lot of turnover and retention in the office, and like, we had a full-time position open up not too long ago, and we had 2 applicants. And it was posted for probably a month, and we only got 2 applicants. We finally hired somebody, but like even summer help, we have a hard time getting summer help in at the pay rate that we're paying.
We're not the only ones. So.
I know.
You're not on an island by yourself there.
Yeah.
It's every
It's
industry in the
just-
continental United States.
Yeah.
I mean, it's everywhere.
So it's just, and one of the other things I see is what some of our employees are making is not, like department heads. We have one department where there's 5 employees making more than the department head because of longevity and overtime. Don't really think that's fair to the department head, because when you have a department, I think the employees should be training while they're here with us to maybe hopefully get that position as a department head. And what incentive is there for them to be a department head if they're going to make less money?
Well, it sounds to me like you already know what your issues are, so why do you need to hire somebody else to tell you that?
Well, we need benchmarking. We need to know what the fair pay rate is. What is the fair pay rate? We have a very rich benefits package.
It's actually public knowledge. You can find that just like you would go and find it. You can find it.
But then you also have to compare it to the benefits. It's not just the compensation. You have to find out, like our benefits, some of us only pay $1 a year for health insurance. What are these other places paying for health insurance? So you got to put the 2 pieces of the puzzle together to really know where you stand in relation to other cities and other businesses here within our area.
Part of what you do too is the private sector, which isn't public information. Can you talk about how that process works?
Yeah, correct. So again, that's where the strength of a big data source really comes into play, and why we actually take in data from a broader ecosystem than just our employer client base that exists here in mostly Indiana, is to really pull in enough data to make good informed assessment as to where you currently stack up. And again, the private sector data is I guess in some ways you could consider some elements of it public when an employer is advertising out on the side of the road what their entry level pay is. But when we talk about that in the context of the different pay bands within an organization, most of it would not be public on the private side.
Based upon what you've discussed with the city and your past experience, what kind of ballpark cost would this study, would be associated with this study?
Yeah, I mean, really that's a function of if we do it from a compensation perspective, how many jobs we're looking at. We do it on a job.
It said in here 30 to 35.
Yeah, for the full compensation study of 30 to 35 jobs, that's accurate. On the benefit side, we'd have to determine what the scope would be and how far into the weeds we want to go. It's possible that in the existing cost structures, we identify savings opportunities, but that's not an absolute guarantee either. I think there are efficiencies to be found in most health plans, but it runs the risk of potentially sacrificing benefits too. We want to make sure we strike the right balance there.
What's the ballpark number?
For the benefit side, probably 10 to 15.
Compensation side?
To do the full study, exactly what you would have on the page for the 30 to 35 jobs.
See that list.
Was that in your update? I don't think that was in
It was
your
in the
update.
previous, yeah, it was in the previous slide deck, you're right.
Is that the 35?
Yes, correct.
Let's see, what's back there.
We're looking at 40 to 50,000, 45 to 50,000.
Yeah, and that's why the recommendation tonight was to convene a committee to determine what scope, if any, makes sense for you all.
Would somebody like to serve on that committee from this board?
I would love to, but I'm sure they want to do it during business hours, and that's not something that I'm,
We could probably work around that some, but if you would like to, I think we could probably try to make that happen. I know everybody on this one is busy, so. Is that okay with you to try to?
Yeah, I mean, here's the deal. We're open to extending the dialogue in whatever way makes sense for you all.
Did you volunteer, Vieta?
I'd really kind of like to think about it instead of just kind of being,
Well, we'll probably try to get together in the next month or so again, so you don't have to make a decision tonight, and there's no decision request from here, but just to continue on the conversation.
Correct.
Okay. Anything else for Cam? Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you all for your time.
Next item on the agenda is 2 ordinances on second reading, 2022-13, which is an amendment to the salary ordinance. Amy, anything change on that?
I made the change that was asked for at the last meeting, which is to clearly state that the city pays half on 2022-13 as far as the payment goes, just as it is reflected in ordinance 2022-14 with the utilities, that they pay half.
Motion to pass 2022-13 on second reading.
Motion's been made. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Rick. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed. 2022-14 is the same idea for the salary ordinance for the utilities. Yeah, nothing was changed on that one.
motion to approve 2022-14 on the second reading.
Motion's been made by Vieta. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Daryl. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed. Bryan Robbins, Director of the Decatur County EDC.
All right, this is just a continuation of business from the last meeting. If you recall, you tabled a total of 7 tax abatement CF1 forms due to a delay in fees paid. I can tell you that all companies have now paid their fees. So we have CF1 for 2019-1, that'd be Lake Point Apartments, 2020-4, which would be Historic Greensburg Apartments, and the 2015-7, 8, 9, 10, and 13, which are value all are up for your approval for their CF1s. They should be in.
They came with a recommendation from the Tax Abatement Committee
Correct.
pending the payment, so they've done that. Any questions for Bryan? If not, we'll take a motion to approve all of the tax abatements as presented.
So moved.
Motion's been made by Rick. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Daryl. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed. Okay, thank you. Chief McNeely, HVAC system.
Good evening, councilors. I'm here tonight to ask for a vote of favor to join the Board of Works in signing a professional services agreement with DLZ. So in your letter that I sent to you, it described that our HVAC system is about 20 years old. In that time, there's been some deficiencies in the system. We've had parts of the system that are out of warranty, parts aren't made for it anymore, and it has fallen into disrepair. I highlighted some of the issues we've had, including the humidity in the building, where we've ended up having mold and mildew issues, the temperature fluctuation, the uneven temperatures within the building, and the shared airflow system with the fire department and the issues there. I did also highlight that we had initially brought in a engineer who works with our current service provider, service provider, and he gave us an initial quote, which I brought to you back in February. I contacted him back to start working forward with the, moving forward with the program, and he ended up telling me he would not move forward without agreeing to work with the company that we are currently using. I didn't feel comfortable with that, and so that's why I went ahead and sought another professional, and he provided me with some insights that the original engineer did not provide. He also provided me with this service agreement. I believe the large discrepancy in the prices that you see account for the type of equipment that the original contract engineer, or the engineer, was going to use versus I believe what we're getting through DLZ is a much more professional service, where they will basically come in and say, here are your different options to fix it. You can go with a cheap version, which is I think what we were getting ready to get if we'd have moved forward with what we had, versus here's option 2 or maybe even option 3, and then come back to you later with those options and be able to provide that to you to make a determination for the city on what the best route to move forward with replacing the system is. So tonight I'm just looking for, and I'm sorry, I have Josh here, Josh Appling with DLZ. He came to answer any questions that you might have that I definitely cannot answer because I do not do HVAC systems. And again, I'm just looking for you to vote in favor of the contract to join DLZ in this project. And you can see on the 3rd page of their letter, basically what the fees cover: the schematic design, the construction documents, the bidding, and the construction administration, for a total of $57,500. We did get clarification that at any point in time we would be able to stop that. So if we get through the construction documents and we were not in, the bidding didn't come in the way we liked it, then we could stop the contract at that point, and we would still have all the work that they've done up to that point. Did I miss anything?
Josh, do you want to sort of talk about what you've discovered as you've walked through and how we arrived here?
Thank you. Josh Appling, Senior Mechanical Engineer at DLZ. So back late June, I believe it was, I met with the chief and the assistant chief to take a look at what the building had, the issues that Chief McNeely's already outlined, and certainly have some ideas on what could be causing the issues. But the intent of our fee proposal, you notice we have the schematic design portion. So we would initially put together some recommendations on some potential fixes. I have two systems at least in mind, but we would vet that out as well as looking at the existing building to further determine what the issues could be. And then as part of that schematic design report we would provide, we would include a estimate of probable cost. We provided something just for sake of an idea here in our fee proposal, but that really gets drilled down more as we do that schematic design and are able to verify what the heating and cooling requirements are for the building, which we would do as part of the schematic design, and then the systems, and then provide, system A we believe will cost this much, system B this, and as well as provide pros and cons, because it could certainly depend on the type of system that approach would potentially go with. Is can the building be occupied while doing the replacement, or if you're doing another system, do you need to not occupy the building, which then has some effects during the construction and the total cost of the year. So that's the intent on the schematic design side, is to really present to the city so you can make an educated decision on what would be the best approach moving forward for what the city's looking to do from both a monetary and then of course occupying the building standpoint. And then based on that decision, if the project moves forward, that's when we would develop the construction documents, the signed and sealed plans that could go out to public bid and, hopefully get a lot of interest in 2 or 3 bids and then proceed from there.
So you don't actually do the work, you're just doing
We don't do the construction. We would do the design services. So we would develop the drawings themselves, the requirements for the contractors then to bid on and provide a price to do the actual construction. And then we would be involved during construction administration to make sure the work's getting done per the plans, review shop drawings, any requests for information that come in, pay applications, items like that.
What's the age of the current building?
20 years.
Now, excuse me, when we go to bid, you would be in that process.
Correct, yep, we would be there for any pre-bid meeting with the contractor, certainly to walk the building, answer any questions via addendum. Of course, when the bids come in, provide a bid recommendation and everything on that, and that is included under the bidding portion of the fee proposal we provided.
To be honest, I don't know the difference between a diffuser or flux capacitor, so that's why I want to bring it. That's why I want to bring in a professional like these guys to be able to.
The way we need somebody.
Yeah.
That can.
I will say the documents that I provided to you had the 2 different breakouts. One was showing that if we used funds that are currently available within the city, the mayor and I worked on this, it would keep us from a large deficit into next year's budget if we decided to push it off until next year. Again, we're not looking for a decision on that, but we are. I just wanted you guys to see there are 2 different options there. I didn't want to come to you with a problem with no solutions. So I brought the solutions as well of it's a huge project, or we look at kind of divided it out. Now, of course, that'll take cooperation with you guys and everybody else to control some of that funding. But I do believe that the amount that is provided, the final amount, is on the high end. These guys can't say that because they have to keep their options open, but we did talk about different options as far as we might be able to utilize some of the ductwork or the return air system or something like that as part of one of the options. So that number is not a definitive, it's just kind of a, hey, we think this is probably about the max you would spend. And the numbers that I did give you actually equal a greater amount than the total given to us by DLZ.
And the solutions we're coming, we're not looking at just a Band-Aid on the current problem. So, and that's where where with that schematic design, we'll expand upon what we're thinking, and then, of course, once we submit that, I'd be available for a meeting like this or another meeting to go over that report and, of course, answer any questions at that time before proceeding on any design, if that's what the city would want to do.
To Mike's point, option one is we can come in later this year. Josh told the board of works maybe 16 weeks on getting us to bid. We would need to have the funds available before we went to bid, which we have the funds. We would have to do the additional appropriations to line them up for the bid. We could work it into our budget conversation so that the funds would already be appropriated on January 1. These numbers from each of those funds will likely set each of those funds into a deficit next year. So we would have to cognizantly make that decision as we're looking at that chart we get every year with the funds in the green and the red boxes, which we're going to delay the project potentially a little bit. You had given an estimated time for construction to be 36 weeks, although that is very subject to change. So we can either wait until after the first of the year if we want to do it during budget season, or we can do it yet this fall. We could do additional appropriations again next spring if we wanted to wait that long, but I don't know that there's a need for that either. There is cash available to do this project. The funds that would go towards DLZ's fee to do this we would spend out of already budgeted funds this year from the general obligation bond that was supposed to be spent on the police department anyway.
That would expedite things, that would make things go much quicker.
The Board of Works has approved the contract with DLZ pending a favorable recommendation from the council, because if you said no chance in the world we're ever going to spend money on that, then we don't need to hire them. But if you think that it is something worth investing in, then we can go ahead, get them working on it, and then really get down more into the weeds on funds and dollar amounts and how we want to handle that yet later this year.
I don't see us having much of a choice. They've got mold issues. I mean, it's got to be taken care of.
Structurally, that's a building that we're going to be in for years to come.
Right. In 20 years is about
The
life of your
lifespan. So, probably on borrowed time.
Yeah.
Is there a favorable recommendation?
I'll make a motion as a favorable recommendation to enter into the contract with TLC to study the HVAC requirements of the building and come up with pricing.
Okay.
Second.
Motion's been made by Kevin, second by Vieta. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Council.
Okay, and we are back to alley vacation. Ordinance number 2022-16. Are there, well, do you want to talk about the committee recommendation?
Yes, I will. So, a while back, we received a petition from Ms. Bray and Mr. Rutan to vacate the alley that we saw in the hearing earlier in your meeting. The traffic committee convened and discussed this particular vacation. First, let me address some comments that were made in the hearing. When the city vacates an alley, if there are existing utilities in that alley, there is a utility easement created across the vacated portion of the alley. So if there are utilities in there, the utilities, either public or private, would have the right to enter into that area to maintain their equipment. So the committee considered the petition. Mr. Bray noted that their property located there would have very limited access, and the committee discussed that. After that consideration, the committee made a unanimous recommendation to the council in favor of the vacation with the condition that Ms. Bray and Mr. Rutan enter into access agreements to allow the other party to have access across the vacated alley. That would guarantee that either party could cross through that area to maintain their own access to their individual parcels. Such an agreement would be perpetual, would be recorded, so that there is a record of that access easement. So with that consideration, the recommendation of the committee was to vacate the alley. I point out, as you are well aware, this is the first reading, and as an ordinance would require a second reading. If you were to have a favorable vote tonight, there would be an intervening period for them, for the petitioners, to make the arrangements for the access easement and get it recorded, so on second reading you would know if that had taken place or not.
I think it's also worth noting that Mr. Bray's concerns were not available until after the committee had met.
Correct.
We arrived at that concern on our own, and at that time both property owners had signed the petition, and we were under the impression that both were in favor of it in its entirety. Is that fair, Kevin?
Yes.
And so I think that concern brought up by a property owner mirrors our concern. I think that should be considered as well.
What about the concern from the other neighbor, Miss Cheryl? Was that addressed? The traffic committee?
That was made aware before our traffic committee.
So if we vacate the area outlined in red here, there is a continuous alley east-west across this area, and then it would continue north out to North Street. So there is access to the rear of these properties here. And Daryl, earlier you asked a question. I managed to remember that you had asked a question, but I forgot your question.
I forgot that I asked the question.
Because I put you off until this part.
His question was addressed in the public hearing.
Okay.
You previously asked a question as to whether, something related as to why the homeowner wanted this, and then the homeowner came forward and said what he wanted. So your question was answered.
It was answered.
Your concerns were addressed. I'm gonna raise my concerns now, though. I'm not 100% sure that you can vacate an alley with contingencies, because it would be, I would be more comfortable recommending that you table this ordinance 1 month and then suspend parliamentary procedure on the second reading and have an agreement in place, or at least a memorandum of understanding between the two property owners, that if this alley is vacated, they will provide the necessary access easements that have been recommended by the traffic entity. Because the problem that both of them have raised is that people keep using that alley. Well, if you don't put up something to stop people from using that alley, they're gonna keep using that alley. And you can put up any sign you want, but unless you're gonna put a cop there, they're gonna keep using it because it's always been an alley. It's kinda like I keep running past stop signs because they never used to be there. So it's the same deal. I would feel much more comfortable from a legal perspective if you had an agreement in place, at least in principle, prior to your first reading.
Now, what happens if one of them sells? Does that?
But and Ron is correct. The access easement would be a perpetual, perpetual thing that goes along with the property. So if one of them were to sell it, it would continue to be an easement. And Ron's equally correct. That is, when we vacate an alley that has utilities in it, we still have access to the utility. Which means that to the extent that they were going to try to put up some sort of fence, unless you want us to drive a truck through it, you better make sure it's got a gate in it. You know what I mean? Like, we're entitled to access the utilities that the city has. And that's what the utility easement would be. And building a fence on an easement is always I certainly wouldn't recommend it from a legal standpoint because you're gonna likely lose the fence. But I think passing it, then hoping they get to an agreement in the next 30 days and then getting back here, I just feel like there's a very high likelihood you're gonna end up having to, either they're not gonna get to an agreement, or that agreement's not gonna get fully drafted, or something's gonna happen, and you're gonna be tabling second reading, and then you've got an ordinance out there that you passed on first reading with just no, it becomes amorphous. I would strongly recommend you consider tabling this until that agreement has been reached and at least memorialized in a memorandum of understanding or some written form, so that you know it's going to happen before you consider passage of this ordinance.
I like that idea. I personally don't feel like I could make a decision either way without going out and looking at it. I have to go out there and look at that. So
Make a motion?
I make a motion for what he said.
Motion's been tabled pending more information from